My fiancé invited the sister who destroyed my life to our wedding without telling me. So I canceled everything, and he never saw what came next. My name is Juliana Lindström. I'm 31 years old, and 6 months ago I got engaged to the man I believed would never betray me. His name is Nathan Hawthorne. We'd been together for 5 years. We met at a product design conference in Bergen, of all places. I was giving a talk about emotional intelligence in UX strategy, and he waited afterward to tell me that I made data sound like poetry. I laughed. I remember thinking maybe for once I met someone who saw me without trying to compete. We were supposed to get married next month. The venue was booked, the rings engraved, the seating chart almost done. That evening, while Nathan was in the shower, I opened the spreadsheet one last time to review the final guest list. That's when I saw it. Nestled between his cousin Ava and a mutual friend from university, Astrid Lindström. My younger sister, the one person I had made absolutely clear, was not welcome in my life, let alone at my wedding. My heart dropped. I read it again slowly, thinking maybe it was someone else. But no. Full name, no mistake. My skin went cold. The soft glow of the screen felt like a spotlight on my worst memory. I could still hear the water running behind the door, still smell Nathan's soap in the hallway. But suddenly I couldn't feel safe in that room anymore. Because somewhere along the way, the man I trusted had made a choice. And it wasn't me. To understand why that name shattered something in me, you need to know who Astrid is. She's my younger sister, 3 years apart, born in the same house, raised under the same roof, but somehow we never learned how to love each other. Our parents tried, family therapy, sibling bonding trips, joint birthday parties, but nothing ever worked. From the moment we could speak, Astrid competed. And when she couldn't win, she found ways to destroy. It started small. When I was 10 and won a school poetry contest, our parents took me to get strawberry cake at a cafe downtown. Astrid sat there pouting, then stood up mid-bite and shouted that I had stolen the idea from her. She demanded they look at her crumpled notebook right there at the table. People turned and stared. I felt my face flush as our dad tried to calm her down. That was her gift, turning moments of joy into silent punishments. As we got older, it became more insidious. If I got an A on a test, she'd stay up all night until she did too, and then accuse me of bragging. If I made a friend, she'd wedge herself in and eventually push me out. I once started dating a boy during our second year of gymnasium. A few weeks later, Astrid casually posted pictures of herself at a concert with him, tagging him with hearts. When I confronted her, she blinked and said, "You don't own people, Jules." That was her nickname for me, Jules. It used to sound sweet when we were little. Later, it just felt like an insult wrapped in familiarity. But the worst came when I was 24. I had just graduated from the Royal Danish Academy with top marks and landed a dream job in Berlin at a design firm known for its clean Scandinavian minimalism. It was everything I had worked for: years of unpaid internships, sleepless nights, notebooks full of sketches and ideas, and late-night tea stains. My parents threw a small dinner to celebrate. Astrid showed up late, said nothing during the meal, and left early. I told myself it didn't matter. I had grown. I was moving forward. Then 3 days before my start date, I got a call from HR. They had received a package, anonymous but detailed. Screenshots of my social media posts allegedly mocking clients. Emails I supposedly wrote using racist and transphobic language. Attachments showing I had plagiarized my graduation thesis. At first I laughed. It was absurd. But the emails were styled exactly like mine. The tone, the signatures, the inside jokes only someone close to me would know. It was like being framed by a ghost. They told me they couldn't proceed with onboarding while an investigation was underway. 2 days later, the offer was formally withdrawn. My breath broke into pieces. I couldn't even explain what happened to friends. What do you say? My sister forged an entire identity to make sure I failed. It sounded delusional, but I knew. I confronted her in person. My hands trembling so badly I could barely unlock the front gate of our parents' house. She didn't deny it. In fact, she said, "Now you know what it feels like to lose." I don't remember much after that. Just that I left everything behind: my job, my pride, my hometown, even my last name in some professional circles. I moved to Oslo with 2 suitcases, a drained savings account, and one rule: Astrid is no longer part of my life. I rebuilt slowly, found freelance work, lived with roommates, changed my phone number. cut contact with most extended family. It wasn't bitterness, it was survival. People love to say, but she's your sister. But they don't know what it's like to be hunted in your own home. So when I told Nathan that Astrid was not welcome at our wedding, I meant it. Not as a request, as a boundary carved into stone. Now staring at that list, all I could think was, he knows this. He knows everything. And still, he let her in. Looking back, the signs were always there. I just didn't want to see them. The first time Nathan mentioned Astrid was over coffee about 3 months before the wedding. He had just gotten off a video call with his mother and said something like, "I know you don't talk to your sister, but wouldn't it be nice to have all family together for once?" I remember the way he looked at me, gentle, curious, like someone testing the temperature of water before diving in. I put my mug down and told him clearly, no. It wouldn't be nice. It would be dangerous. He didn't push, not then. The second time we were driving home from his cousin's engagement dinner, he was quiet for a while, eyes fixed on the highway, then asked, "Do you think people can change?" I turned to him and said, "Some people, not all." "What about people who've done terrible things but regret them now?" he added. I didn't even blink. Regret is cheap when the damage is done. He nodded, but I could feel the tension coiling in the silence between us. Something about the way he asked, the timing, the persistence. It didn't feel random. Then came the shift, subtle but sharp. I started finding old photos of me and Astrid placed oddly around the apartment. One was tucked into the side of a bookshelf we rarely used. Another was stuck in the back of a drawer we had cleared out weeks earlier. It felt intentional, like a breadcrumb trail leading to a memory I never wanted to revisit. I asked Nathan about it once. He said he didn't notice, smiled like maybe I was imagining things. I wasn't. One night after a long workday, I came home and found him sitting on the couch scrolling his phone. He looked up and said, "You know, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means peace." I stood there frozen for a second before I asked, "Are you reading self-help quotes now?" He laughed. But I didn't, because deep down I knew what this was. This wasn't about peace. This was about wearing me down. I reminded him again slowly this time. "Nathan, my boundary with Astrid isn't about revenge. It's about protection. She ruined my life. She hasn't changed. She hasn't apologized. She doesn't belong anywhere near our wedding." He nodded, then wrapped his arms around me like that would make it okay. Except it didn't. Because 2 weeks later, I overheard him talking on the phone. He was in the hallway. I had just gotten out of the shower and paused when I heard my name. "No, she doesn't know. I'm trying to figure out how to tell her." "Yeah. I think if they just talked, maybe it could finally—" I didn't hear the rest. My pulse drowned everything out. I stepped back into the bathroom, closed the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. My face was pale. My eyes were trembling. That night, I didn't ask him what the call was about. I couldn't. Maybe I didn't want the confirmation. Maybe part of me still hoped I was wrong. But hope, I've learned, is a dangerous thing when it blinds you to what's right in front of you. A week after that, we printed the final guest list. We were both tired. Stress from work, pressure from vendors. Nathan handed me the papers with a tired smile. "Just double check and we're done," he said. So I did. And that's when I found her name. Astrid Lindström, line 38. Neatly typed, alphabetized. As if she'd always belonged there. Nathan was in the kitchen making tea, humming softly like this was any other night. But it wasn't. It was the night I realized that the person I was about to marry, the man who had held my hand through nightmares, who knew every crack in my past, wasn't on my side anymore. He was playing both fields. And the worst part was he thought I wouldn't notice. I waited until he brought me the tea. He set the cup down beside me, chamomile, with too much honey, just how I liked it. I stared at the list in my lap. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. I didn't want to explode. I wanted him to look me in the eye and say it wasn't what I thought. I cleared my throat. "Hey, quick question." He looked up, warm and unsuspecting. "Yeah, did you add anyone new to the guest list?" He hesitated. Not for long. Just a breath. But I saw it. That moment of calculation. Then he smiled. "Nope. Just finalized some addresses." Why I held his gaze. Because Astrid's name is on it. The smile vanished. His shoulders dropped. He looked down at his tea and sighed like I'd just brought up the weather turning bad. I was going to tell you, he said. My chest tightened. You already invited her. He didn't answer. Which was the answer? Nathan. My voice cracked. You promised me. You looked me in the face and told me she would never be part of this. He ran his hands through his hair, restless now. I know what I said. But I thought, Juliana, it's been years. People change. My stomach twisted. I stood up. No. No. This isn't about change. This is about lying to me. I wasn't lying, he shot back. I was trying to help. Help, I nearly laughed. Help who, me or her? I thought if you saw her, maybe you thought I'd forgive her on the spot. Hug it out over canapes and champagne. He didn't answer. I stepped closer, my voice low and sharp. When did you reach out to her? Another pause. Too long. About 3 months ago, he admitted. 3 months. Around the time he first brought her up over coffee. Around the time he asked if people could change. You've been talking to her this whole time, I said. He nodded. I just wanted to understand. I wanted to know what really happened. I froze. What really happened, I mean. I know she hurt you, but people have different sides. Maybe there was more to it than just I stepped back like I'd been slapped. You think I made it up? No, he said quickly. I just thought maybe you were holding on to it too tightly, letting it shape too much of your life. You think I wanted that? My voice shook. You think I wanted to carry this? I don't know, Juliana. I didn't want you to be consumed by it forever. Then you should have married someone else. He flinched. I didn't care. I walked to the window, heart pounding, hands trembling. Oslo's skyline stretched out beyond the glass, quiet and indifferent. When I turned around, he was still sitting there, jaw tight, eyes pleading. I love you, he whispered. Then you should have respected me, I said. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full. Full of everything we couldn't take back. The trust he broke, the fear he fed, the space he gave my sister in our future. I picked up the guest list and held it out. I told you, I said. If she's in this wedding, I'm not. He didn't move, so I dropped the paper onto the coffee table, turned, and walked to the bedroom. I didn't pack that night. I didn't cry. I just lay in the dark, wide awake, listening to the quiet breathing of a man who said he loved me, just not enough to listen. The next morning I called the venue, then the florist, the photographer, the string quartet we'd booked for the garden ceremony. Each cancellation felt like a small death, a version of myself vanishing with every polite apology. I'm sorry, we won't be moving forward. No, there's no reschedule. Yes, I understand the deposit is non-refundable. By the time I hung up the last call, the silence in the apartment was deafening. Nathan had left earlier without a word, just the click of the door and then nothing. Later that afternoon, the messages started. His mother called me first. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally played it back, her voice was tight with disappointment. Juliana, I can't believe you'd throw away something this beautiful over a guest list. This isn't what love looks like. Then came the text from his sister, accusing me of being dramatic, cold, selfish. One of his groomsmen sent me a single line. You just broke him. Hope you're proud. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, phone and hand numb. They didn't know. They didn't want to know. To them, I was a villain in a white dress who chose bitterness over family. But they hadn't lived in my skin. They hadn't felt what it was like to have your world deliberately shattered by someone with your last name and then be asked to smile through it. I expected Nathan to reach out. He didn't. 3 days passed. I stayed at a friend's apartment across town. I barely spoke. I went on long walks in the cold. I drank too much chamomile tea and sat with the ache in my chest like it was an old wound reopened. Then a new voicemail, my mother's voice this time. Sweetheart, your father and I just want to understand. Maybe Nathan was wrong, yes, but surely it's not worth ending everything over. Can't you talk to Astrid just once? People are watching. This isn't good for anyone. People are watching. Not, are you okay? It hurt more than I wanted to admit. That night I opened my email and saw a new message from an old mutual friend. Subject line, I heard what happened. I clicked it. She said she'd heard about the cancellation about the fight, and that she didn't know the full story, but had always thought Nathan was one of the good ones. Then she wrote, I just hope whatever he did wasn't worth losing something that looked so solid. I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling. When had looking solid become more important than being safe? I had spent years hiding the depth of what Astrid did, not because I was ashamed, because I was exhausted. Explaining trauma to people who don't believe in boundaries is like pouring water into a bottomless glass. They never think it's enough. They always think you're the problem. But here's what they didn't see. They didn't see me curled up on the floor after losing my Berlin job, shaking with rage I couldn't name. They didn't see me flinch every time a blocked number called, wondering if it was her playing some new game. They didn't see the nights I stared at my own resume, wondering if anything would ever feel clean again. They didn't know, and they didn't ask. I thought Nathan was different. I thought he'd understand that healing sometimes requires distance, that forgiveness is not a group activity, that peace is not passive. But he didn't. He believed, like so many others, that love meant smoothing over the past until it no longer looked ugly from the outside. I wasn't interested in appearances. I was interested in truth. And the truth was, I could rebuild the flowers, the dress, the day. But I couldn't rebuild trust with someone who thought their vision of closure mattered more than my pain. So I stayed quiet and let them talk. They said it would just be dinner. A quiet meal, just the three of us. Nothing heavy. Just a chance to talk, maybe breathe. That's how my mother phrased it over the phone. Soft, cautious, as if I were made of cracked porcelain. I should have known, but some part of me still wanted to believe she meant it. That my parents, even with all their blind spots, could offer comfort without condition. I hadn't seen them since the cancellation. Maybe for once they'd try to understand. The moment I stepped through the door of my childhood home, I knew something was off. The hallway smelled like cinnamon and too much perfume. My father greeted me at the door with an awkward half smile, his hands wiping nervously on his slacks. My mother hovered behind him, eyes wide and wet, like she was already sorry for something she hadn't said. And then I saw her, Astrid. Sitting at the dining table, her posture too perfect, a glass of red wine, balanced between two fingers, like a performance. My chest locked. I stopped mid-step. The silence cracked like ice under my feet. "What is she doing here?" I asked. My father stepped forward. "Juliana, please, just hear her out." My mother reached for my arm. "We thought, if you both just talked," maybe I pulled away. "You set me up." "No," my father said quickly. "We just wanted to give you both a safe space." I laughed, short, hollow, bitter. "There's nothing safe about being ambushed in your own bloodline." Astrid stood slowly. "Jules, don't call me that." She flinched. I didn't care. I wanted to say I'm sorry, she said. Her voice trembled. It sounded rehearsed. "I've been in therapy," she continued. "I know I've hurt you. What I did back then, sending those emails, the fake accounts, I was in a dark place. I didn't know how to handle my anger." I stared at her. "You knew how to handle it just fine. You handled it with precision. You didn't lash out. You planned. You executed. You ruined a career." She looked down. "I just want my sister back." "You don't get to want that," I said. "You don't get to want anything from me." My mother's voice cut in small and strained. "Juliana, we're trying. Please don't shut the door on this." I turned to her, jaw clenched. "You already did. The moment you chose to invite her into this house without telling me." My father stepped forward. "We thought if we didn't tell you, you wouldn't come. And then we'd never get the chance to fix this." "You don't fix betrayal with more betrayal," I said. "You just bury it deeper." Astrid opened her mouth again, but I raised my hand. "No, you had your chance years ago. When you smiled and told me I deserved to lose. That was your moment, and I believed you. I still do." She sat back down slowly, her lips pressing into a line. I looked at both of my parents, then down at the place setting clearly meant for me. The wine, the softened candles, the illusion of warmth. I stepped back. "You want a family reunion," I said. "You can have one, just not with me." My mother's voice cracked. "Juliana, please, you're still our daughter. Then start acting like it," I said. And I turned and walked out. The air outside hit my face like a slap, sharp, icy, honest. Behind me, I heard the muffled sound of my mother crying, my father calling my name, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Because some doors once shut need to stay shut, even if you love the people on the other side. I didn't speak to anyone for the rest of the weekend. Not my parents, not my friends. Not even the colleagues who messaged to say they were thinking of me. I stayed in my apartment with the curtains drawn, sipping cold tea I never finished, and replaying the dinner scene like a loop I couldn't turn off. Every detail kept crawling back Astrid's voice saying, I've been in therapy, the way my mother set the table like it was Christmas, my father calling my name as I walked away. I had told them for years my peace wasn't up for negotiation. They didn't listen, and now I couldn't unfeel the betrayal. Monday morning came like a fog. I turned on my laptop, ready to dive into work to lose myself in wireframes and product reviews and emails that didn't ask me to forgive anyone. But there it was, a new message subject line in bold. I'm sorry, please read this. It was from Astrid. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't open it right away. I couldn't. Part of me was curious. What could she possibly say that she hadn't already rehearsed across the dinner table? Another part of me, a bigger, quieter part, felt something close to dread. Like clicking that message would be stepping back into a house I'd already burned down. An hour passed. I opened it anyway. It was long, paragraph after paragraph. She talked about therapy, about inner child work, and generational wounds. She wrote that sabotaging my career had come from a place of deep jealousy, of feeling invisible, of never measuring up. She said she envied how naturally I seemed to hold everything together, my grades, my friendships, my confidence. She said hurting me made her feel powerful for the first time in years. She said she was sorry, that she didn't expect me to forgive her, that she just wanted me to know she was trying. I read it once, slowly, line by line. Then I closed the tab. Not because it was cruel, not because I didn't believe parts of it, but because none of it changed what happened. There are some things you can't clean with words, some wounds that don't need explanations. They need absence, distance, silence. People always talk about closure like it's something someone else can give you. Like there's a right combination of apology and timing that will unlock the pain and let it float away. But what if closure is just not answering? What if healing is choosing not to open the door again? That night, I sat on the floor of my living room. Legs crossed, laptop closed, lights dimmed. I lit a single candle, not for ceremony, just to remind myself that peace can be quiet. I didn't reply to Astrid's email. Not that day, not the next. I didn't delete it either. I just let it sit there like a book I'd already read and didn't need to reread. Later that week, I went for a walk near the fjord. The air was brisk and damp, the water still. A few early spring blossoms had started to bloom along the trail. I watched an elderly woman throw crumbs to ducks while humming to herself, utterly content in her solitude. I wondered when I'd feel like that again. Not broken, not angry, just still. Maybe not soon, but I'd get there. And I didn't need anyone else to walk me there. The apartment felt bigger than I remembered. Not because it had changed, but because everything that used to fill it, plans, laughter, late-night arguments over candle holders, was gone. The wedding dress was still in the back of the closet, zipped inside a cream-colored garment bag I hadn't opened since the day I brought it home. It looked ridiculous now, hanging next to my everyday coats and sweaters, like it didn't belong here, like it had wandered in from someone else's life. I didn't cry when I took it down. I just folded it carefully like it was something fragile but no longer sacred and placed it in a box. The veil followed, the ivory heels, the save-the-date cards we never sent. One by one, I packed away a future that no longer existed. Then I changed the layout of the furniture. It was a small act but meaningful. I moved the couch to face the window, took down the framed quote Nathan had hung by the entryway, rearranged the bookshelf, switched the mugs so my favorite one was finally in front again. They were ordinary choices, but they made the space feel mine again. I didn't speak to many people during those weeks. Some friends reached out. A few offered to come by. One sent me a Spotify playlist titled, "You Didn't Deserve That." I smiled when I saw it, but I didn't hit play. I didn't need noise. I needed the silence. I needed to hear my own breath at night and not mistake it for someone else's. Healing didn't come like a movie montage. It didn't arrive with yoga classes or red wine or a rebound relationship. It came slowly, quietly, in the way I folded laundry without shaking, in the way I cooked dinner and actually tasted it, in the moment I realized I hadn't thought of her or him for a whole hour. One afternoon, I sat in the corner chair with a book in my lap and no music on. The sunlight filtered through the curtains and warmed the hardwood beneath my feet. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. I didn't need to explain why I left. I didn't need to justify why I didn't reply. I didn't owe anyone a graceful version of my pain, and that oddly felt like freedom. A few days later, I went to a cafe I used to love but hadn't visited in months. I brought my journal and ordered cardamom buns and black coffee. The barista remembered me. We chatted about nothing for a few minutes. She didn't ask about the wedding. I didn't bring it up. It felt like starting over without having to pretend. On the way home, I stopped by a florist. I didn't need flowers, but I bought a small bouquet anyway, soft lilac and eucalyptus. When I got home, I placed it by the window. No symbolism, no metaphor, just beauty I chose for myself. That night, I stood by the kitchen sink, hands in warm water, staring out over the quiet Oslo street below. A few neighbors passed by with dogs. A child rode a scooter in a coat too big for her. It was just life. Simple, undramatic, unconcerned with mine. And I smiled. Not because everything was okay, but because I finally believed it could be. A few weeks later, I said yes to a rooftop party. I didn't want to at first. It was hosted by an old university friend I hadn't seen in ages. The kind of person who was always organizing things, always trying to bring people together. She sent me a message with a line that made me pause. No pressure. But I think you might like the air up here again. So I went. The building overlooked the Oslo fjord. Early evening light had turned everything gold. Strings of soft bulbs stretched across the deck, flickering gently in the breeze. There was music, but low. Laughter, but not loud. It didn't demand anything from me. I liked that. I held a glass of sparkling water and leaned against the railing, letting myself breathe without scanning the room. I didn't feel like hiding. I didn't feel like proving anything either. For the first time in months, I wasn't performing strength. I was simply standing still. That's when she walked over. Her name was Clara. Shoulder-length hair tucked behind one-ear sleeves. Rolled-up smile, easy but not forced. She asked if I liked cardamom buns, which made me laugh. We talked about books, road trips, northern lights, her dog a golden retriever named Hugo. I didn't mention Astrid, or Nathan, or the wedding that never happened. She didn't ask. She didn't need a backstory to sit beside me and talk about quiet things. When the wind picked up, she offered me her scarf. I shook my head, smiled, and said, "I'm warmer than I've been in a while." And I meant it. When the party wound down, she looked at me and said, "Feel like grabbing a milkshake?" I hesitated for a second, then nodded. We walked down 4 flights of stairs and into the quiet street. Oslo at night glowed soft amber under the street lamps. Our steps weren't rushed. There was no undercurrent of urgency, no game of pretend. Just 2 people sharing space. That night when I got home, I stood by the window. The bouquet I'd bought the week before had started to wilt. A few petals had dropped onto the sill. I didn't throw them out. They still smelled like spring. I thought about everything that led me here. The promises that broke. The voice I had to raise. The silence I had to claim. The weight of letting go not just of people, but of the need to be understood by them. Astrid's email was still in my inbox. I hadn't reread it. I wouldn't. Nathan never called. My parents sent one more message I didn't respond to, and I felt no guilt for the stillness. Because this wasn't loneliness. This was peace. A life that didn't ask me to forget what I'd been through or to forgive it on anyone else's timeline. Some days, the aches still came. In the shower, at red lights, during random songs on the radio. But it didn't control me anymore. It was just part of the landscape now. A scar, not a wound. I didn't know if I'd fall in love again. I wasn't looking, but I had fallen back into myself. And that was more than enough. I whispered almost without thinking, "You didn't break. Not to anyone, just to myself." Then I turned off the light and let the night hold me. What did you think of Juliana's story? Have you ever had to walk away from people who claim to love you just to finally breathe on your own terms? Let me know in the comments. If you were in Juliana's place, would you have given Astrid another chance? Or walked away like she did? Type number 1 if you believe Juliana chose strength. Type number 9 if you think some wounds never deserve reopening. And if this story stirred something in you, a quiet memory, an untold goodbye, don't carry it alone. Share your story below. Subscribe to Sophia's Revenge Stories for more true stories of betrayal, boundaries, and becoming, one voice at a time.